So we've been talking a lot about grassland soils and the potential for these grassland soils to act as these carbon sinks and these nutrient-rich soils. And so I thought it would be a good idea for us to actually get a look at one of these soils. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to take this soil core, which is a pretty simple tool. And what we're going to do is we'll find a space that we want to take a core from, and we just want to kind of push back the plant material a little bit. And then I'll put my soil core down, and this is the fun part. And I just love doing this because it's like, you know, taking a peek at like what's underneath my feet. So I'm going to give this a little bit of a twist, so when I pull up the core, I just took a little bit of a shallow core, but we can see here some of our prairie soil. And what I want us to notice is, in part, like how rich and dark this soil is. And that's because there's a lot of organic matter in this soil. And that organic matter is really where all of that nutrients and that carbon is stored. So I'm just going to kind of take this core into its pieces here, and one of the things I want to just talk about is the structure of this soil. And so one of the other important aspects of our prairie soil is that it has this soil structure to that. And what I mean by that is that it has this complex system of soil particles that are all fitting together that allow it to have the stability that this soil has, and to allow it to protect those nutrients and that carbon, and to allow that water to remain in that soil longer. So one of the things that I also want us to take a look at right now with this soil is that, you know, in my hands I'm holding soil organisms, and in particular I'm holding bacteria, and I'm holding onto fungi that's in the soil. And so in the same way that like we have a microbiome that helps with our health, the prairie has its microbiome that helps with its health. And it is this prairie microbiome that we're really interested in looking at with regards to restoration. And you may be asking, like, well, what is the, you know, why would we need to think about a prairie microbiome for restoration sites? And the reason for that is, if you think about it, all of our restoration sites are former agricultural lands. And these agricultural practices, like adding fertilizer, of tilling the soil, which takes these aggregates and just breaks them all up and makes these aggregates unstable, because it's just breaking them up over and over and over again and making them smaller and smaller and smaller. So we have, you know, tilling the soil, we have adding these fertilizers, we have the fact that we plant crops in monoculture, and so we're just adding the same plant inputs into the soil year after year after year. And with all of that too comes erosion of the soil. And so essentially what agricultural practices do is they shift the microbiome so that, you know, it is reflective of those agricultural practices, unlike our prairie soils. And so if we're trying to restore that land in the same way that we may try to restore our own microbiomes, we have to think about how do we shift that microbiome back so that that soil and the plant community that comes along with it can function together in unison. And so what my research is really looking at is, like, what are the best ways of really thinking about how to get this prairie microbiome into these places in need of restoration.